emerges in this period. What makes something news? And we have this assumption that's news, that's not. Well, you'd say, if I asked you, well, stories about politics and world affairs and business, sports scores and news, natural disasters. I mean, if you think of the things you've just seen in the last week or two on the news, a lot of them have this: accidents, crime, art, science, and then these other book reviews and movie reviews and television reviews and weather reports and columns and announcements and comics and all of it, horoscopes, crossword puzzles. All of this stuff is collected in one form of publication that you pick up in the morning or that comes across your doorstep in a strange way. I mean, if you think about these things, they have a lot in common. When we come to talking about the idea that you've got to get your gossip, your crossword puzzle, and your information about what's going on in Syria from the same source, with this very thing. The assumption is implicit in this, that there's a kind of natural hierarchy of importance among all these events. Locality obviously plays a role. Hippolyte de Besson, who founded Le Figaro, which is the first modern French newspaper, a little earlier, 1830, 1840, but becomes, along with other papers later in the 19th century. And the French press is also having these same developments. Writes, to my readers, an attic fire in the Latin Quarter is more important than the Revolution of Madrid. What's local is what matters. That's why you always see these strange. Something bizarre happens. The old line, dog bites man isn't news, man bites man isn't news, man bites dog is news. But it has to be a local man. A Fremont man bit his dog yesterday. Now, why that's more newsworthy than the fact that somebody in Amarillo, Texas bit his dog yesterday is not clear. If it happened, it happened. But nonetheless, there's a presupposition that news should be local. We want to know what happened to people around us, even if we don't know them. There's a possibly apocryphal posting in a London newsroom. One Englishman is a story, 10 Frenchmen is a story, 100 Germans is a story, and nothing ever happens in Chile. Which is still true. I mean, if you look at the coverage of remote disasters, earthquakes in Turkey, as opposed to bus accidents in Tennessee, you'll see that the prominence is given to the local story. The people who are more like us, even if the amount of carnage and slaughter whatever was much greater in the first case than the second. These are more important than winter furnace breakdowns. Yeah, that makes sense. Although maybe fewer people are hurt by plane crashes than by, let's say, a power blackout or a heat blackout that something affects the heat. I don't want to say the crimes of rich criminals, I should say incomes. It's crimes are more important than crimes of poor criminals. The richer you are, the more newsworthy the nasty things you do are. Even if it has nothing to do with being rich. I mean, it's a question of shooting your wife or something like that. Rich people shooting their wives is much more. And when you look at, I don't have this slide here, but when you look at reports of disappearing young women, disappearing blondes, disappearing white women are much more heavily covered than disappearing women of color. That's the general rule. Business news is more important than labor news, was very interesting because they're both equally important. I mean, that's in terms of their economic consequences and their implications for the population, but business gets much more coverage, in part because they're the people who are paying the bills. Breakthroughs in science are more important than breakthroughs in, discoveries that particles may move faster than light. For a while we thought that last month, didn't we? That's more important than a breakthrough in garage, auto repair. Right? Though, to be sure, the odds that your lives will be affected by the speed of particles, the question of whether particles move faster than light, are a lot smaller than the odds of whether your life will be affected by a new way of fixing ignition systems. With this also, the rise of this notion of objectivity. Influenced by a lot of different things. It's the age of science. Science not just in terms of the work that science does, but the epistemological authority of science, the ability of science to persuade people of certain truths, the faith in science that people acquire. The influence of photography, we talked about representation of the world, unaffected by the position or attitude of the observer. The weakening of partisanship, I mentioned, 1860, the government printing office established, which does the work that used to be farmed out to the circulation press that depends on advertising, and the professionalization of journalism, which I think should have mentioned in that reading, where journalism, which is you didn't need a high school degree to be a journalist in the 1820s or 1830s, all of a sudden becomes an occupation for young college men and women, and subject to professional standards, where professionalism always involves, in some sense, the notion of professionalism involves professional standards of behavior, canons of correctness. And journalism courses, journalism schools begin to emerge by the 1880s. You're beginning to see these. So journalism itself is created as a profession in this period. The wire services, which I mentioned, have a particular role in this. The Associated Press, United Press, both emerge in this period. The AP writes this a little later, but it's an accurate description. The president of the AP writes in 1913. The AP's members are scattered from the Atlantic to the Pacific, from Canada to the Gulf, and represent every possible shade of political belief, religious faith, and economic sympathy. Obviously, the Associated Press can have no partisan nor factional bias, no religious affiliation, no capitalist nor pro-labor trend. So you have to have a form of news product that at least appears to be unbiased, uncolored by any point of view, so that you can sell the product to all parts of the country, like the newspapers of different opinions, and so forth. And there emerges then at least a style of reporting. It often is no more than a style that presents itself as objective. In fact, when we talk about objectivity, it's really kind of a mess. There are a number of different features that make for objectivity. First is the notion you're just reporting the facts, just the facts. I know people don't recognize the character on the upper left there, but he is the model for the character on the lower left that some may recognize. No, it's interesting. The upper left is Sergeant Joe Friday from the show Dragnet, a popular show of the 50s, Just the Facts Man, and was a model for a character on Sesame Street, but I think the character disappeared from Sesame Street at a certain point before you're done. Anyway, Just the Facts Man. He was played by Dan Aykroyd in the movie some years later. My dispatches are merely dry matters of facts and detail. No opinion, just the facts. Detachment, it's cool rather than emotional in tone. It doesn't use emotional or evaluative or colored language. It's just strict and neutral. Without prejudice, color, without style, Lincoln Steffens wrote. That's what read in exactly the same way. You should be able to know who wrote the story if it was done properly, because it was a mechanical procedure like taking a photograph. Balance. Both sides of the story. Each side in a political controversy has to be presented. That's fair. That's what's fair and balanced, to use the phrase adopted by one or another news source. I can't remember. We'll come to that in a moment because that's rather complicated. And neutrality and nonpartisanship. The news, the journalist had to, whatever his or her personal views might be, had to present the news from a neutral and nonpartisan point of view. Couldn't be taking the side of one or another. And there emerges this style, this degree zero voice. You're supposed to report, again, Lincoln Steffens, whom I mentioned earlier, was one of the important, the Shame of the City, one of the important muckrakers. Reporters were to report the news as it happened, like machines, without prejudice, color, without style, all alike, no humor, no personality. You're supposed to be like a form that's called the inverted pyramid. Any mass? Well, it's not mass comedy anymore. Okay, tell me about the inverted pyramid. Your name is Karen. Tell me about the inverted pyramid. exactly. You write the story such that the most important thing, you lead with the most important information, and the next most important information, and the next most important information, and so on, so that you can cut the story off at any point, and it will still be coherent. You still have what you need. This is the story from the New York Herald in 1865, when this began to emerge about Lincoln's assassination. This evening at about 9:30 p.m. at Ford's Theater, the president, while sitting in his private box with Mrs. Lincoln, blah, 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 was shot by an assassin. The assassin, next paragraph, then leaped on the stage. The pistol ball into the back of the president's head. The president's been insensible, is now dying. The assassin entered Mr. Seward's apartment, who was the Secretary of War, who in part was responsible for something. No, Stanton, he was the Secretary of State, Seward. I don't know if he shot Seward. Was Seward killed or shot? Or I don't know. But it's not as important, right? Lincoln goes down further down. So this style, like I was telling about the inverted pyramid that everybody's still in journalism class, journalism 101, you learn to write like this. So people written high school papers, you got to learn basic stuff. All of that emerges in this period. Now, impartiality is a little tricky. If you look, for example, at the way the New York Times, this is before Oakes bought the paper, covered lynchings in the South. They felt that this was an article that should, by the rules of objectivity, be covered in a balanced way. So when Negroes lynched by a mob, they feel they have to cover it in a neutral way. Let me see. In an editorial in 1894, I won't go through all these, it is a peculiar fact that the crime for which Negroes have frequently been lynched and occasionally been put to death with frightful tortures is a crime to which Negroes are particularly prone, that is to say, molesting white women. And the Times feels they have to report that because that's what the other side is saying, and that's what neutrality requires. Ida B. Wells, very interesting character, a journalist, fought ferociously for a long time to get coverage of lynching and to have lynching denounced by the press in all its horror. Chased out of, I think, Kentucky, where she originally was, wound up in New York, went to Britain. The British gave her a cool reception. They wrote, the Times, the British supported her and denounced lynching, and the Times wrote that their action was based on the ex parte statements of a mulatto refugee who was a refugee because she imputed unchastity to the victims of Negro outrage in the South. That is to say, she had suggested maybe the white women had something to do with this, and that was imputing chastity to them. Why would you trust somebody who would say such an outrageous thing? So balance in this period can be a way of, in fact, failing to. If there's only one, there's a story that Fred Friendly was the producer. People saw Good Night, Good Luck movie with George Clooney about Edward R. Murrow a couple of years ago. Terrific movie. You can see everything now. Whatever. Fred Friendly, who's played by, he's actually a family friend of ours, a large, kind of chunky, very Jewish guy. He's played by George Clooney in the movie, and I always thought it was bizarre. But Fred Friendly said about Edward R. Murrow, after he did the famous Harvest of Shame broadcast about the condition of agricultural workers in the South, was asked by Paley. Bill Paley was the head of CBS. Why are you just getting one side? Why aren't you getting the other side in this, the grower side? And Murrow said, there is no other side. And this is one of those cases of lynchings also where there really was no other side, and the effort to get balance created a false impression of what was going on. Behind this, and the whole notion of objectivity, balance in particular, is a certain model of public life. Daniel talks about the spheres of public discourse. He says, look, at the center, there's a set of issues about which we all agree, or only deviants disagree on these things. Slavery is a bad thing. Double standard is a bad thing. I just wrote something about that. I mean, look at the coverage of the Limbaugh incident. So there's nobody who's in favor of the double standard, right? The double standard is a bad thing. It wasn't always, but now it's a bad thing. Pollution's a bad thing. Votes for women, that's a good thing. These are the issues about which there's no controversy. And if I'm reporting them, I don't have something that has to do. I don't have to give another side. If there's somebody out there who thinks that, for instance, Bush and Cheney were responsible for 9/11, that's this other sphere, the sphere of deviance. That people believe that, but I'm not responsible to balance views with that. In between those two, the sphere of deviance and the sphere of consensus, there's a sphere of legitimate controversy, a set of issues about which it is generally agreed, and I'm using the passive form because it's not clear who has to agree generally, that there are various opinions that may be legitimately entertained. Whether, for example, taxes should ever be raised or all budget efforts should come from cutting expenditures. I remember the Madison Society was formed in 1964 at Columbia, right? It was the silliest thing in the world. Now it would certainly be in the sphere of legitimate controversy. And maybe even moving toward the sphere of consensus, not yet, but it may within a generation move to the sphere of consensus, in the same way that the idea that interracial marriages should be permitted is now in the sphere of consensus. So things move back, or sometimes things move the other way. Vaccination, the value of vaccination would be in the sphere of consensus, it's nonetheless out there, and there are people saying, no, you have to get the other side on that. Global warming is an issue. New York Times doesn't, they don't feel that they have to quote somebody who doesn't think global warming. So certainly not creationists, people don't feel they have to quote creationists in stories, but the definition of these spheres is going to determine when balance and objectivity are required. When they're not, there's certain domains, certainly, in which balance isn't required at all. Sports, for example. If I turn on the Giants game and I listen to Krupp and Kite, the two Giants announcers, I do not expect them to be balanced. I know they want the Giants to win, and they expect that I want the Giants to win. They're going to talk to me. Now, they're not going to exaggerate. They're not going to say that Aubrey Huff is having a good year when he's not. But they're going to presumably take a point of view, and I don't say, oh, that's not objective. Of course, it's not objective. It's baseball. It's not politics. So in this period, as I say, along with the development of this ideal of objectivity, this notion of propaganda, to take these pictures to persuade people that the officers and men in the Crimea were really quite happy, despite the reports of John Russell. We talked about the propaganda by the French government in manipulating the photographs taken by the Communards of these executions. You can go back, you can say Tennyson's poem about the charge of the Light Brigade was propaganda, making heroes out of these crazy idiots who charged them. You can go back to the French Revolution and see examples of what strikes us in retrospect as propaganda. After the Girondins were in power, people could keep track of the changing governments in the French Revolution. In 1792, the Girondin revolution, one group of revolutionaries was in power. France was at war. There were rumors that the clergy were conspiring with the enemies of France. Mobs broke into monasteries, killed a number of priests, and in what were called the September massacres. Roland, who was the Ministry of the Interior, said, "Oh well, there happens a way that minimized the awfulness of the slaughter." Edmund Burke, the Irish, English statesman, parliamentary statesman, English, but Irish origin, excoriated Roland, saying things are never called by their common man. When you speak to the people, you're being indirect, you're misleading opinion, and so on and so forth. Already at this point, there's something like propaganda. In the Crimean War, it wasn't just those photographs. You begin to see language used in this way. The word casualties in the names of insurance companies, ethnic casualty. It doesn't mean it's not about dead people. It's about accidental losses and protecting you against accidental losses. But it's used during the Crimean War to refer to people who are injured, the soldiers who are injured, and becomes ultimately loses its euphemistic quality, becomes a word for the dead. but it begins as a euphemism to soften the reports of casualties of war. The word propaganda itself enters the language. It's been around since the 17th century. It really becomes a big deal in the early 20th century, around the time of the First World War, when states begin to make systematic efforts using all the tools of modern communication and the institutions of the press and so forth to control and manipulate public opinion, drum up support for wars in particular. Will Irwin, who's an American journalist who was involved in the propaganda effort by the Wilson government in World War I, writes that before 1914, propaganda belonged only to literate vocabularies. 2 years later, the word had come into the vocabulary of peasants and fixed figures and had begun to acquire its miasmic, that is to say, pejorative aura. You will have seen in the readings, which I'm sure you will do if you didn't have time to do as well. The British really were the masters of this. Created or exaggerated all these stories about German atrocities. Germans with the shooting of the young Belgian girl. All of these stories drum up support. Viscount Bryce is made head of an inquiry committee to determine whether these are true. Yes, indeed, he says during the war they are certainly true. All these things happened. Most of them happened, and this plays an enormous role in drumming up support for the British war effort. When the U.S. Comes into the war in 1917, we rapidly established our own system. The Creel Committee, George Creel, an American journalist, is made head of this. 75,000 people are made 4-minute men. They go to vaudeville and movie theaters and so on, give little 4-minute speeches in every language from English to Yiddish to Italian to Sioux, telling people to support the war effort and distributing leaflets and brochures and comic books and so on, all to whip up support for the war. They didn't call it propaganda, but then already propaganda has this pejorative sense, so it was just information. And in fact, if you look at the frequency of the word propaganda over this period, this is in the press, it goes from virtually nothing to a high in the Cold War and then disappears more or less. Not because there isn't propaganda, but because propaganda becomes, I'll say something about this in a minute, propaganda becomes a word for crude propaganda. Right? Bill O'Reilly still talks about liberal propaganda, progressive propaganda. But a few people still uses this word a lot. But it's slightly crude. The word Orwellian increases in frequency in this period. But you can see how the word becomes enormously more frequent over the course of the 20th century. And after World War I, other sources come in, are introduced that also are manipulating the public opinion. Did we talk about the press age? I have a feeling we talked about the press age here, or we haven't. Paul and I sometimes repeat material in this class and another graduate seminar. I can't remember which slide these were. The publicist, the press agent, public relations are the creation of the post-war period. Many of them former journalists who make it their business to write and either plant or instigate or encourage the writing of stories in about their clients using various wiles. Edward Bernays, a fascinating character, Freud's nephew, the father of modern public relations, writes a book about public relations, a very positive book. Look, you need public relations. The conscious and intelligent manipulation of organized habits and opinions of the masses is an important element in democratic society. Those who manipulate this unseen mechanism of society constitute an invisible government, which is the true ruling power of our country. He says this positively. I mean, the government's too complicated. You cannot just throw information out there and expect people to be able to absorb it and come to a single opinion. You've got to frame it. You've got to slant it. You've got to tell the story. And press agents and public relations people do this. Propaganda itself has become, people become much more suspicious of propaganda by this time. By the time of the eve of World War II, almost half of Americans blame propaganda for the U.S. entry into the First War. This is partly because of the strong isolation settlement in the U.S. and they don't want to get involved again. And actually, Roosevelt, when World War II comes, has to mount a new apparatus of propaganda to whip up support for involvement in this war, far more sophisticated than the one in 1917 because everything's gotten more sophisticated, the press, the public, and so on. Fiorello LaGuardia is made the head of this information Office of Facts and Figures, it's called. Just to be sure it isn't about propaganda. Later, the Office of War Information, the OWI, to provide people just with the facts they need to make their opinions. That's the official role. LaGuardia, in a letter to FDR, says, look, what we're giving them is sugar-coated, colored, ornamental matter, otherwise known as bunk. Right? I mean, they know what they're doing, but as Elmer Davis, a journalist who becomes the director of the Office of War Information and is very effective, says, look, the easiest way to do this is with movies. With propaganda films, you get a lot more support for the war with a movie like Casablanca than with news reports. And there are all these movies like Casablanca and The Road to Bataan and Destination Tokyo and so forth that appear in this period, along with the propaganda films. There aren't a lot of time. Let me just stop here and say how many people got a chance to look at the two movies that I put on? Not a lot. One? Yeah. Oh, really? Oh, okay. I should have checked it. I copied the link from last year. It's out there, I'm sure. I'm sure you can find it. Did people look at the Capra, Why We Fight? Anyone? It's worth. I mean, it's a movie. Yeah. And your name is?
I actually watched it before I started. I actually enjoyed the writing style. I felt a lot of messages in it where push as hard for the lifestyle for a long time.
Have you seen the Riefenstahl as well? Anybody seen Riefenstahl's Triumph of the Will? Yeah. Olympia is a similar film. Triumph of the Will is just a long documentary about a rally in Nuremberg in 1934, is it? 36, 34? Just lots of footage of these Nazis saluting and the crowds cheering and the planes arriving and flying and the speeches and so on. And very powerful film using the same techniques that Riefenstahl later used in the Olympiad, the famous film of the 1936 Olympics. Utterly different from the Why We Fight films that Patrick's talking about, which gave Hitler invaded. It's one of those things where you see the black ink of Nazism, why Hitler invaded, why he did this, who he killed, and so on, lots of facts. Turns out, wasn't that effective. It was effective for the officers, not for the men. When you asked, when they did surveys of this, the earliest surveys. And it wasn't effective because men don't fight because Hitler invaded Poland. They fight for their colleagues, their comrades. And it's very much a question of not letting the guy next to you down or not letting your sergeant down, not fighting for democracy. Officers may do that. Better educated people may do that, but in fact, probably the Nazi propaganda at that level was more effective. Though, to be sure, films like Casablanca